Hello, interwebs. I hope you're doing as best as you can, which I think is going to be the new phrase I start this channel with, because I don't think I can say I hope you're doing well, because I know for many of us we aren't. But regardless of that sort of darker notion, let's jump to a different darker topic, which is to discuss a frankly not surprising, but something deeply concerning and something that I want to speak out against alongside several of my other fellow members of the Star Trek community surrounding the recent reaction to the newly released Star Trek Section 31 movie on Paramount+. And that is to discuss some of the horrific and atrocious hate, harassment, and even death threats being sent towards the creatives on that film. Now, certainly talking about harassment and hate within any fandom is not something new. It has been getting worse and worse and worse. It's something I've talked about a lot within the Star Wars fandom, because that is sort of the biggest hotbed of that type of behavior. But seeing it become more and more pronounced in the Star Trek fandom, honestly, again, does not surprise me, considering how emboldened so many toxic folks are right now, considering the culture that we are in. But it is something that I want to just continually speak out against and be very clear and very firm in where I stand on it, especially considering my own views and reactions to things like Star Trek Section 31. And for those of you who have not seen my review over on my main channel, I did not like that movie. You can go watch the whole review, but I am very, very critical of it. In fact, it's probably my most negative and critical. In fact, it is my most negative and critical review of any Star Trek project of the current era of the franchise. My biggest problem with it ultimately can be summed up with it feels just like corporate Star Trek. That it feels like it's just doing Star Trek just to do it with a brand without anything to actually say with what Star Trek as a franchise, as a series, as an ethos can say. That being said, I make very clear throughout that video that there are some positives here. And also, I point to several times how I have a lot of respect for the creators on the show, especially Michelle Yeoh and Olatunde Osunsami, who directed the movie. You know, I liked a lot of the work in other places. I may not love all of their work. I particularly have some issues with Olatunde's directing, even though I like his producing work on Discovery. But overall, I have a lot of respect for them, as I have respect for any creator that gets anything made in this day and age, and attempting to pay the bills, make work, try to create something with fun people, especially with a diverse group of people, especially right now. So I have a lot of respect for them, and I make that very clear throughout my video. Unfortunately, and I see this in the comments and the reactions, people take these people being negative as an impetus to say, haha, well, looks like you're on our side now. You understand that Star Trek has all been shit under Alex Kurtzman. It's all woke DEI nonsense. And not all of them are even saying woke DEI nonsense. There's a good portion of them that are going into that very reactionary space. But there are some people that sort of take it as this impetus of me being like, aha, you now hate all of these things. And I want to be very clear, that is not the case. I dislike this one project. I have a lot of criticisms of Alex Kurtzman, who is the head of the Star Trek franchise right now, and his direction for Star Trek over the past few years. But that being said, there are many things under his reign that I have loved, I have hated, I have despised, I have adored. Star Trek Lower Decks is one of my favorite Star Trek things ever made, followed closely by Prodigy, and that's made under him. And I have a love-hate relationship with Discovery, but overall, I really do adore it. And while I did not like Picard, I'm very happy for a lot of people who did like Picard. And Strange New Worlds, I have an up-and-down relationship with as well, even though I generally like it and lean towards positive on it. But I have a lot of appreciation for what Kurtzman has done, a lot of the creators on Star Trek have done over these past few years. And I take each project, I try my best to take each project, each thing with a fresh mind and fresh look and try to go, what are they trying to do here? And while my review of Section 31 is very negative and very concerned for the direction of the franchise, especially if this is indicative of that, and it is indicative of a lot of problems that have existed in the franchise just brought to their example in Section 31, I am always trying to be respectful of the creators and the people who make it, especially right now at this time. And I get very, very angry and very upset when people take that negative criticism or what I would like to consider like negative but yet constructive criticism, and frame it as like, oh, now you can get into the reactionary space. Now you can feel like you hate all of these things. No, I always try to take these things on their face and appreciate them for what they are and critique them for what they are, because I care about Star Trek. I care about creators. I care about artists trying to make things. And that ethos that, if you're negative to something, you must be in this camp now. Or if you're positive on something, you're in this camp now. I think does numerous things. The first off, it's meant to make us more reactionary, polarize us, and get us away from actually, having discussions, forming community. But also it has the detrimental effect on us being able to discuss art in any constructive way. Just because I dislike Section 31, just because I have critiques of Section 31, does not mean I hate the artist. That does not mean that I am making these criticisms out of toxicity or hatred or anger. It is done out of a constructive critique in hopes of making the work better, of informing the artist, if they so choose, to be aware of my thoughts on the work and maybe improve themselves if they, or not even improve themselves, but like take my critique in, whether they agree with it or not. And also to let those of us who watch the thing have a discussion about it. I would rather have a discussion about Section 31 and say, here's my issues with it, here's my concerns with it, here's why I don't like it, and have a conversation with someone who may adore it, than I would ever want to just sit with someone who agrees with me 100% but does so in a toxic, disgusting way. And I think that we need to have more of those conversations. And I want to be able to critique things that are bad. There are things in older Star Trek that are atrocious as well. Go watch Code of Honor. It is one of the most racist episodes of any TV show, let alone Star Trek. And yet I like talking about that episode, not because I think it's good, not because I like that it's in the franchise. In fact, I wish it wasn't a part of the franchise, but I think it is a part of the franchise. And we need to discuss it and what that means for what Star Trek was saying at the time, what the problems were of Hollywood at that time, what they are indicative of saying about us as a society that this show is reflecting at the time, because Star Trek is always trying to talk about society. And so even the times where it fails miserably are interesting to discuss. And the same with Section 31. The issues to Section 31 are indicative of larger things going on in the Hollywood industry right now, franchises, our political culture at the moment. And I find that fascinating. I don't find it good. I don't particularly enjoy the movie, but it is here. It's a thing that exists, and I am glad that it exists in the sense that like it provides us a thing to talk about. And unless something is outright horrifically vitriolic and vile, I would rather it exist than not. And there are things to discuss within that. And I think we need to be having that in constructive criticism. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it just becomes down to harassment and campism that ultimately fuels, within fandom spaces, much more toxic discourses, reactionary discourses on both sides of things, but also the larger pull towards the right wing and a lot of the stuff we're seeing in our society today. This is not the cause of, obviously, but certainly indicative of. If you do not know, I live in Los Angeles. I have a lot of friends, both working in Star Trek, working in Hollywood generally, and it is a rough time right now, as it is for many people, especially considering the recent LA fires. I go out to bars, I go out and hang out with some friends, and frankly, every single time I have a conversation with someone, everyone's fucking depressed. And as a trans person right now, I feel that generally, and I think everyone is feeling that to some degree. But like as an industry, as Hollywood, like you feel it just like you don't go into this industry without wanting to have something to say, something to do, something to give, something you're inspired to make. And I just see so many people beaten down by this industry and how it treats so many people. I'm sure so many other artistic industries saying the video game industry, whoo boy, just as bad, if not significantly worse. Everyone is trying their best. Everyone is trying hard. And it is really angering to just see that there's an inability, it seems, to be able to, in spaces, to give criticism that is constructive and feel like it is trying to be respectful of the artists and the creatives. It's just a thing that goes into the reactionary world that we currently live in. It is very saddening because I see, and it honestly breaks my heart, I have seen writers, creatives, people who I love and adore, hell, showrunners of shows, tell me that they don't know why they're making things anymore. Even people who are successful. And it's really rough. And I want them to know, and I think they see, but you always focus on the negative, and I feel this very much too, that you only get to see the reactionary. You only get to see the negative. You only remember the hate, the anger, the vitriol. But there are people who adore these things, who these things are meaningful for. Lower Decks meant the world to me. I cried at its finale, and those things they mean a lot to me, especially right now when the world seems dark. I cling to artists that make things. And yet we live in this reactionary, toxic time where everything must be loved or hated. Everything must not challenge anybody. I think that's honestly really what it comes down to, because a lot of the toxic spaces, and again, I'm not framing everyone who dislikes something as toxic. I dislike many of these things too in some degree. I've just talked about that with Section 31. But toxic folks, what they want is to be unchallenged. They don't want to have their worldview challenged. They just want easy, unchallenging media that reaffirms their view of the world. They do not want to see anything that challenges their view of the world, whether that be just a person of color or a queer person existing in a space, or ideas that challenge their very status quo mindset of anything that says, think about something different, think about something new. And Star Trek has always been a franchise that has, not always done that to the best degree. It's sometimes been tokenizing. It's sometimes even been racist and offensive. It's sometimes even been conservative and reactionary in some of its ethos and some of the things it has made. But it has generally, as a franchise, been a thing that has said, hey, think about a different way we can think about the future. Think about a different way to challenge yourself. Think about how you see others and how you feel about them, whether they be a weird alien who you see as a rock monster, or a queer person, or a person of color who deserves to be sitting alongside you on the bridge, who deserves to be right next to you, who deserves to be in charge of things just as much as you do. And that's what Star Trek has generally been. Not always. It's faltered in that. It's been imperfect, but it's generally what that says. That is what Star Trek is to me. And these folks just do not want it. They do not want to be challenged in any way. They do not want to face anything that challenges their view of the world. Star Wars is worse about this because Star Wars is a very monomythical, savior of the world sort of stereotypical hero that does sort of reaffirm our beliefs of certain ways the government and fascism and, status quo works. And so to see any type of change to that, it gets even more reaction, especially since Star Wars is more popular, but Star Trek gets it too. And this brings me to, something that my two fellow Trekkies, Sean Farrick over at Trek Culture, as well as Steve Shives, who has his own wonderful channel, have been speaking out against. And that is the recent death threats that we've been seeing going at Alex Kurtzman, and again, many of the other creators in Section 31. It's unacceptable. Now, these are not new, especially for people of color, queer people. They have been receiving these death threats for a long time. I'm sure Alex Kurtzman himself has been receiving it. In fact, I was at a Doctor Who Star Trek panel at San Diego Comic-Con a few months ago, and someone asked Kurtzman about something, and it was something about reaction to things like this, and Kurtzman stood up and said,
there are so many people who are using the internet to, just post negativity. It's a bathroom wall. And they can say anything about you, and they can say anything about you with impunity and immunity. And that is unkind. And that is not okay. And so, but it is what it is, right? That's the world that we live in. So my feeling is that unless you want to get into the ring and try and write a Star Trek episode, it's very easy to criticize it. And if you're going to criticize it or criticize me as a person, you don't know me, right? You don't know anything about me. Then you are not welcome into my head. And I have to
you don't get to own me. All the hate that I get, you don't get to control my mind. You don't get to live in my mind. And you could tell that stuff like this affects him. He gets a lot of it. And I can see why he's probably divorced himself from looking at the internet as he probably has. And again, I have my issues with Kurtzman as a storyteller. I have issues with some of the ways he has brought Star Trek. I have my ups and downs relationship with him as a creator, but I have an utmost respect for him. I have an utmost respect for him as a person. I have an utmost respect for him for getting shit made and supporting creators during this time. I mean, if you didn't know, Tawny Newsome spoke about this. Alex Kurtzman gave a bunch of his money during COVID, during the writer strike, to pay for the writers on Star Trek to be able to pay their bills. I actually even recently, there was a GoFundMe going out for some Star Trek writers for the recent show Starfleet Academy. Because they had lost their home in the LA fires that recently happened. And I went to donate just $5 because it was what I had to help them. And I looked on there, and Kurtzman was on there, and he had donated, I think, $2,000 to help them, on top of what he had already done to help them during the writer's strike. So, this is a man who, at the very least, supports his workers, which is, frankly, more than anyone else who ran Star Trek has done, especially more than Gene Roddenberry in his later years on The Next Generation, his stealing money from other artists throughout his entire tenure on Star Trek, and Rick Berman's treatment of women and other minorities behind the scenes on Star Trek. So, frankly, on that level, I have more respect for Kurtzman than anyone else who has run Star Trek, and it is seen and it is recognized. Sure, do I have issues with him as a storyteller here and there? Sure, he's also made a lot of things that I love. And frankly, for people to send him death threats because they don't like a TV show is gross. It's really gross. And it also, not that, it's bad regardless of whether he's made a good or bad things. Even if he's made other shit, even if you think everything he's made is a piece of trash, he does not deserve that. And it's just abjectly inexcusable. Because a lot of the stuff that goes on with Star Trek, like the canceling of Star Trek Prodigy, the canceling of Lower Decks, that's not his decision. I have much more ire for the executives and the money people over at Paramount who are treating Star Trek like shit, like a product, like a brand, without any care for what it actually is. Kurtzman has, again, my criticism, my respect, and it is absolutely unacceptable to send harassment to him, death threats to him, to any creative on a work of art. Unfortunately, I can say this, and I know it's not going to change things. Again, we are living in a culture that is now currently emboldened those people. It has been a growing problem for years that I and many others have been speaking out against, but now it has reached a place where, this is just the culture we're in, where all those people feel emboldened to say whatever they want. Whether it be in fandom spaces or whether you be the richest man alive making a freaking Nazi salute on stage in front of everyone, and they feel like they can get away with it. Well, you know what? You don't. You are unwelcome in my space. You are unwelcome in the spaces around me. You are unwelcome here. You do not get to feel your safe space here with me. And when I see people take what I hope is constructive and kind, if negative criticism of something like Section 31 is evidence of ooh, you're gonna turn reactionary, ooh, you agree with us now, ooh, Star Trek's all shit and Kurtzman sucks. No, fuck off. I may have my issues, I may have my criticisms, but I always try to take every work as what it is. And for those of you who make the arguments oh, I care about Star Trek so much, I'm so hurt and need Star Trek. It's my comfort thing, and I love it so much, and it means the world to me. And so seeing it being destroyed by Kurtzman breaks me apart. Yeah, I understand that feeling. I want to let you know, I have Star Trek tattoos. Star Trek is the thing that got me through depression. It saved my life as a kid. I would not be here today. I would not be out as a trans person if I did not have Star Trek. It was the one place I could see myself. A lot of my job, my work, my hopes, my dreams, my only thing that I can cling on to sometimes for a hope for the future comes from Star Trek. I have a lot of depression these past few days, these past few weeks, because of what's going on, and Star Trek is a thing that I hold on to in that time to make me remind me that there is hope for a future. I hold on to it very hard. So I get you when you say, I care about Star Trek. I get it. I get how important it can be to someone's life. I see the TV glow of Star Trek all the time and want to enter into that world and want to create it in this world. And yeah, something like Section 31 makes me a little bit sad for where it is in the franchise. But at the end of the day, it is unacceptable to not recognize that this is a work of fiction that is meant to inspire us or not, and you can leave it or not if you don't like it. And while I am here to critique it, I am a critic. I am someone who is willing and ready to critique something. I will watch these things because I want to offer up my views as an artist, as a creative, as a critic. And I care about these things to make it better. That is ultimately the ethos. I want to make it better. I want to be here to help improve, to just talk, to be part of the community, to build a community, whether I like the direction of things or not, to build that sense of community as a creative and as an artist. And if you are not here to do that, if you're not here to recognize this is a work of fiction meant to display something to us, whether we like it or not, whether you realize that this is a work made by multiple people or not. If you do not realize these things, that these are human beings making these works, you can get right out of here. And I feel somewhat bad about this, but I used to be in a place, you can see it throughout all my work, where I've had patience. I've tried to explain things. I've tried to be open and welcoming. I've tried to be kind and caring. I've tried to explain and be, and just try to walk people through my thought process, other thought process, to be kind of caring. I am at a point right now where I need people to shut up or show up. Because if you're not going to show up and actually speak up for folks, stand by folks, be open about folks, and this is not just Star Trek. I know I'm kind of going beyond it, so I'll try and pull it back, but I'll just make this point. I need you to show up to help defend these creators, help defend these things as Mariner falls over. I need you to stand up, and if you can't do that, then just say nothing. And I hate to say that. I want to create conversation, but I'm at a point where that's where we're at in the world. And if you're not doing that, then I don't know what to do. And it sucks to say. I'm not trying to be mean or hateful. I'm just telling you where I'm at emotionally, because it's what I have at the moment. I don't have the energy. I just do not have the emotional capacity, because I'm making this video about Kurtzman right now, but I'm also dealing with today shit that's going on with my fiance's family as a trans person. So I just don't have the spoons. Sorry, that got very heated. I will end on this. I may not like everything that comes out about Star Trek, but I do try to care about it. I care about the people who make it. I care about the people who care about it. Even if you disagree with me on things. I don't hate you. But we've hit a point where we just need to realize we have to be very firm about what is acceptable or not. And shit like sending death threats to these creators, stuff that has been ongoing in so many fandom spaces, and seeing it become more and more prominent, especially in a fandom space that I care deeply about, like Star Trek, it is time to stand up and be clear about what is okay or what is not. And that is not okay. And at the end of the day, regardless of whatever comes next for Star Trek, be it the things that I love, like the next best Star Trek thing ever to come out comes out next, or it's all trash from here on out, I will still hold on to what Star Trek means to me. It will still be there. It's not going to go away. And I hold on to that. I'm going to push for that. I'm going to fight for that. Whether it be in a fandom or it be in the real world. But you have to remember what it is. It's a work of fiction meant to inspire. Not a canon, not a Bible, worthy of protection and vitriol and violence, to hold on to what you demand that it mean to you. Anyways, take care, everybody. Live long and prosper. Gotta pick up Mariner now.